At 49, no one expected Blake Shelton's story to take such a devastating turn. What began as a life filled with music, fame, and love has now been shaken by a tragedy that fans are struggling to process. The man known for his charm and laughter is now facing a heartbreaking reality that few saw coming. Behind the spotlight lies a truth that will leave you speechless. This isn't just sad, it's absolutely gut-wrenching. He's so busted. Here's what really happened. Blake Shelton might look like the guy who has it all: fame, fortune, a big smile, and a voice that fills stadiums. To fans, he's the funny, charming cowboy who lights up the stage and the screen. But behind that easygoing personality and quick wit is a man who's been carrying a heavy weight for most of his life. What people don't see is the hidden pain that's shaped him, haunted him, and quietly influenced almost every step of his journey. From the outside, his love story with Gwen Stefani seemed like a fairy tale. Two stars from totally different worlds, country and pop, falling in love after going through painful divorces. Their relationship gave people hope. It looked like they had both found healing in each other. But over time, that picture-perfect love story started to show cracks. Behind the red carpet smiles and sweet Instagram posts, something was shifting. Insiders began whispering that things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Gwen was spending more time in Los Angeles, focused on her fashion line and music career. Blake was retreating to his ranch in Oklahoma, where life is slower, quieter, and more grounded. The $13 million zero-cents mansion they'd bought together in California, a place meant to be their compromise, now reportedly sits mostly empty. It was supposed to be a blend of their worlds. Instead, it became a symbol of their growing distance. For Blake, the silence inside that house isn't just about a relationship that might be slipping away. It's about fear. Fear of losing something he thought would finally last. He's already been through 2 divorces. He's already had to rebuild after heartbreak. And now, facing the possibility of another broken marriage, he's staring down the same pain all over again. What makes it even harder is his bond with Gwen's 3 sons. From the beginning, Blake embraced being a stepdad. He spoke often about how those boys gave him a new kind of purpose, a new kind of love. The idea of walking away from them, of losing that connection, is more than just sad. It's devastating. Behind the spotlight, Blake Shelton isn't just a superstar. He's a man who's trying to hold on, trying to make sense of why love keeps slipping through his fingers, trying to protect a heart that's already been broken more times than anyone should have to endure. And no amount of fame or money can fill the emptiness that kind of pain leaves behind. Blake Shelton has it all, or so it seems. He's one of the biggest names in country music. He's got a $150 million zero-cents fortune, a catalog of hit songs, sold-out tours, and a face that millions recognize from his long run as a coach on The Voice. From the outside, it looks like he's living the dream. But when the cameras shut off, when the stage lights fade, and the crowds go home, what's left behind is something far less glamorous. Fame has given Blake everything he thought he wanted, but it's also left him more alone than ever. It didn't start that way. When Blake first entered the music scene, he was a small-town guy from Oklahoma chasing a dream. His early success felt like magic. The world noticed his voice, his style, his charm. Austin, his debut single, went straight to the top of the country charts. And from there it was hit after hit, album after album. Nashville welcomed him with open arms, and for a while the success felt good, earned, exciting, even healing. But fame has a way of slowly changing things. What begins as a celebration can turn into a trap. The schedule fills up, the interviews pile on, the fans want more, the business deals come calling. Suddenly, you're not just a guy singing songs. You're a brand, a product, a machine that can't stop moving. And for Blake, the faster the machine moved, the more he started to feel the cracks in his own soul. He built an empire. Between The Voice, his music, and a long list of endorsements, from Pizza Hut to Smithworks Vodka, Blake's name became a business. Even his restaurant chain, Ole Red, became a symbol of his success, spreading from Nashville to Orlando. But all the while, something inside him was shifting. The more money he made, the more space he created around himself. And that space, instead of giving him peace, started to feel like isolation. He'd bought land, a lot of it. His 1,300-acre ranch in Tishomingo, Oklahoma, became his fortress. There, tucked away from Hollywood and Nashville, he tried to find silence. He tried to reconnect with who he was before the spotlight. And to a degree, he did. That ranch became his safe place. It's where he hunts, fishes, writes songs, and walks around in the quiet. But even that peaceful land couldn't stop the ache from settling in, because the truth is, no amount of property can fix a broken heart. There's a reason Blake is drawn to solitude. Behind the fame is a man still grieving lost love, lost family, and lost parts of himself. His brother Richie's death when Blake was just 14 left a hole that never fully closed. That early loss planted a deep fear inside him, the fear that nothing good ever lasts. And that fear followed him into adulthood, into marriage, into music, into every corner of his life. Even as The Voice turned him into a household name, Blake was splitting his time between California and Oklahoma, trying to balance a high-profile life with a longing for normalcy. Filming in Los Angeles for 23 seasons wasn't just tiring, it was draining. He was away from his roots, away from his comfort zone, and the more time he spent in LA, the more he missed the simplicity of home. But fame doesn't let you go that easily, and neither does the money. That $150 million 0-cent fortune came with strings attached, expectations, obligations, constant visibility. It's hard to be vulnerable when the world is always watching. Harder still to admit you're struggling when everyone thinks you've already made it. Blake kept showing up, smiling for the cameras, writing songs and performing for crowds, but deep down, there were days when the success felt more like a cage than a gift. His businesses, while thriving, became part of the weight. Ole Red was meant to be a tribute to his roots, a place where fans could feel connected to the small-town version of Blake. But it turned into another reminder that everything he did, even his love of simple country life, was now a product. His name was everywhere, his image on billboards, commercials, vodka bottles. The line between who he was and who the world wanted him to be started to blur. In moments of stillness, when he's back at the ranch or in his private recording studio near Lake Texoma, Blake wrestles with that contrast. Those are the moments when he writes his most honest music. Alone in a room, with no audience to perform for, he puts his heartbreak, confusion, and longing into words. The songs that fans stream millions of times are often born in silence, pulled straight from the parts of him that fame never healed. And then there's his personal life. The cracks in his marriage with Gwen Stefani didn't happen overnight, but they were made worse by the very thing that gave them their platform: fame. She thrives in Los Angeles, surrounded by fashion, music, and energy. He needs the quiet, the open fields, the privacy. At first, those differences seemed like balance. Now, they seem like distance. They bought a mansion together to bridge that gap, but even the $13 million 0-cent home couldn't bring them closer. It now stands as a quiet reminder that even the richest people can't buy unity. Blake's love for Gwen's 3 sons is real and deep. He's said more than once that being a stepfather gave his life new meaning. But if the marriage ends, so does that part of his life. That thought alone, losing the boys he's grown to love, hits harder than any career setback ever could. People who know Blake well say that the fortune has become a shield. It protects him, yes, but it also keeps him from dealing with the deeper wounds. When things hurt, he builds. A new house, a new restaurant, a new brand. But none of those things can sit across from you at night. None of them can fill the space left by love gone cold. They're walls, not bridges, and after a while, even Blake started to realize that. He's generous, he gives back, he supports veterans, helps schools in Oklahoma, donates to disaster relief. That side of him is real, and it shows that despite the isolation, Blake hasn't lost his heart. He still cares. But caring doesn't stop the loneliness. And money doesn't soften grief. At 49, Blake Shelton has more than most people could ever dream of. But what he craves: real peace, deep love, lasting connection. Those things can't be bought. They come from healing, from truth, from letting yourself feel what you've spent decades running from. Fame gave Blake a platform. Fortune gave him freedom. But both also took something from him. They made it harder to just be Blake, the man, not the star. And in the quiet moments, when the crowds are gone and the ranch is still, that's who he's trying to find again. Maybe the saddest part of Blake Shelton's story isn't what he's lost. It's what he still hasn't found. Blake Shelton is known for his charm, his humor, and his voice that has carried him through more than 2 decades of country music success. But behind the smiles, behind the music, there's a wound that never really healed. A pain so deep and so personal that it still echoes through everything he writes, everything he sings, and everything he's become. Long before the fame, before the fortune, before the stages and spotlights, Blake's life was changed forever by one of the most heartbreaking losses a teenager could face. In 1990, when Blake was just 14 years old, tragedy struck his family in the worst possible way. His older brother, Blake Shelton, was killed in a horrific car crash near their hometown of Ada, Oklahoma. Richie was only 24 years old. He was more than just a sibling. He was Blake's role model, his protector, his hero. Richie was the one who introduced him to music, who made the idea of becoming a musician feel real. Losing him was like losing a part of his own identity. Blake has talked about Richie in interviews over the years, but the pain in his voice always gives away what words can't fully express. That kind of loss isn't something you just get over. It leaves a hole that nothing else can fill, no matter how much time passes. At an age when most kids are worried about football games or school dances, Blake was trying to understand death, grief, and the kind of silence that follows after someone you love disappears in an instant. Blake's parents, Dorothy and Richard Shelton, leaned heavily on their faith and community to get through the tragedy. But for Blake, things were different. He was the baby of the family, still figuring out who he was, and now the person who helped guide him was gone. That pain didn't go away, it just went somewhere deeper, somewhere quieter. And Blake did what so many artists do when they don't know how to process pain. He turned to music. Music became his escape, his therapy, his way of staying connected to Richie. Blake had already been playing guitar thanks to his uncle, who introduced him to the basics, but after Richie died, something changed. The guitar wasn't just an instrument anymore, it was a lifeline. He started writing songs, pouring emotions into lyrics that no one else saw. He wasn't trying to get famous back then. He was trying to survive. By the time he was 15, he was performing in local talent shows. His voice carried something that judges and audiences couldn't ignore: real emotion, the kind that can't be faked, the kind that comes from having lived through something most people haven't. He didn't talk much about Richie in those early days, but you could feel it in every note. Years later, when Blake's music finally hit the mainstream, that pain came with it. His debut single, Austin, was a bittersweet ballad that hit listeners right in the heart. Fans connected with the honesty in his voice, even if they didn't know the full story behind it. But those close to Blake did. They knew every sad song had a thread connecting it back to 1990, to a road outside Ada, to a brother whose dreams never had a chance to come true. In 2012, Blake co-wrote one of his most emotional songs ever, Over You, with then-wife Miranda Lambert. The song was written about Richie. It was Miranda who actually recorded and released it, but the words came from both of their hearts. It became a huge hit and won Song of the Year at the Country Music Association Awards. But for Blake, it was more than just a hit single. It was a way of finally letting the world hear Richie's story, a way of honoring the brother who never got to see what Blake would become. Over You wasn't just a tribute, it was a release, the kind of emotional unloading that artists rarely get to do so publicly. It gave fans a glimpse into the pain that had shaped Blake's life in such a big way. And while the song brought comfort to many people going through their own grief, it also reminded Blake that some wounds never really close. But Richie's death didn't just shape Blake's music, it shaped his relationships. Blake has been married 3 times, and each one of those marriages followed a pattern. They started with hope, passion, and connection, but somewhere along the way, they unraveled. And many people close to him believe that his childhood trauma plays a big role in that. When you lose someone you love at a young age, it can leave you constantly waiting for the next loss. You might fall in love, but part of you is always scared that it's going to be taken away. That fear, whether you talk about it or not, affects how you show up in a relationship. You guard your heart. You pull back when things get too hard. You try to control things so you don't have to feel out of control again. And that's something Blake has had to battle his whole life. His first marriage, to his high school sweetheart Kynette Williams, fell apart as his career started taking off. Fame pulled him in one direction, and life back home pulled in another. His second marriage to Miranda Lambert was passionate, high-profile, and intense, but also unstable. They were both artists, both carrying their own emotional baggage, and it eventually became too much. His third marriage, to Gwen Stefani, began as a story of healing, 2 broken hearts finding each other. But now even that love seems to be under strain, and through it all, Richie's absence lingers. Blake's never had the chance to fully grieve in private. Every time something painful happens in his personal life, it gets dissected in tabloids and gossip blogs. But the real pain, the stuff that no one sees, is much deeper. It's not about the headlines. It's about a 14-year-old kid who lost his brother and has spent the rest of his life trying to fill that void. Even now, with all the success and all the money, Blake is still that kid in many ways. He still retreats to his ranch when things get too loud. He still writes songs in solitude. He still misses Richie. He always will. Grief doesn't go away. It changes shape. It softens in some places and sharpens in others. And for Blake Shelton, it's been both a source of strength and a lifelong ache. His ability to tap into real emotion is what makes his music so powerful. But that ability came at a cost. A cost that he's still paying to this day. Fans love Blake because he feels real. He doesn't try to be perfect. He doesn't pretend he hasn't been hurt. But what many fans don't realize is that behind every joke, every smile, and every song is a wound that never healed. And maybe never will. That's not weakness. That's life. That's loss. And for Blake Shelton, it's the part of his story that he carries quietly, tenderly, and truthfully, song after song, year after year. Blake Shelton always dreamed of making it big. As a teenager growing up in Ada, Oklahoma, the idea of country music stardom was more than a fantasy. It was a goal. He had the voice, the heart, and the pain that gives a country artist depth. And when he made it, really made it, it looked like everything had fallen perfectly into place. But, over time, the dream started to change. It started to close in. And somewhere along the way, what once felt like freedom began to feel like a cage. It all started with a song. Austin, Blake's debut single, hit #1 on the country charts and stayed there for 5 weeks. Almost overnight, he went from a small-town kid with a guitar to one of Nashville's most promising voices. People loved him. His humor, his down-to-earth vibe, his emotional honesty. He wasn't trying to be a star, he was just being Blake. And that's what made him different. But with success came expectations. With fame came pressure. In the beginning, it was exciting. Touring, recording, interviews, award shows, it was everything he thought he wanted. But as the years went on, the schedule never slowed down. In fact, it only got heavier. The more successful he became, the more he had to give. And that kind of life doesn't leave a lot of room for rest, reflection, or relationships. Suddenly, Blake was everywhere, except home. His first marriage to his high school sweetheart, Kaynette, slowly began to fall apart under the weight of his rising fame. It wasn't because they didn't love each other. It was because they never had time to breathe. He was always gone, always working. And even when he was home, his mind was still on the road, on the next show, the next song. Fame took him away, little by little, until there was nothing left to hold on to. Then came Miranda Lambert. Their marriage was a media sensation. 2 country stars, both wildly talented and fiercely independent, trying to build a life together under the constant gaze of the public. For a while, it seemed magical. But the pressure of living in the spotlight began to take its toll. They were rarely in the same place for long. Careers came first. And when emotions ran high, there was nowhere to hide. Every fight, every rumor, every moment of tension became a headline. Their love wasn't just theirs anymore. It belonged to the world. And eventually, it all fell apart. Blake poured that pain into his music. Songs like She's Got Away with Words weren't just catchy. They were raw. You could hear the heartbreak, the frustration, the weariness. He wasn't trying to be polished. He was trying to survive. He once said that he writes best when he's hurting. And unfortunately, the hurt just kept coming. In 2011, Blake joined The Voice as a coach. At first, it was a fun side project, but it quickly became one of the biggest parts of his career. For 23 seasons, he showed up on national TV, mentored young talent, cracked jokes, and kept millions of viewers entertained. Behind the scenes, though, the filming schedule was brutal. Months away from Oklahoma, months away from the quiet life he missed, the show gave him visibility, money, and a whole new fan base, but it also took him further away from who he used to be. During that time, he met Gwen Stefani. Another broken heart, another hopeful beginning. Their love felt real. Like maybe, just maybe, 2 people from totally different worlds could help each other heal. And for a while, they did. But even their relationship started to feel the pressure of careers pulling in opposite directions. Gwen was deeply rooted in LA. Blake belonged to Oklahoma. And again, the dream started to stretch them apart. Blake's fame also brought him wealth, more than most artists could ever dream of. With that money, he built a 1,300-acre ranch in Tishomingo, Oklahoma. It became his escape, his sanctuary. He built a chapel on the property, planted roots in the soil that reminded him of his childhood. But even that retreat became bittersweet, because no matter how far he got from the industry, it always found a way to pull him back in. The more land he bought, the more businesses he launched, the more restaurants he opened. It all looked like success. But to him, it started to feel like noise. He built walls, both literal and emotional, to protect himself. Fame brought fans, but it also brought judgment. It brought opportunities, but it also brought isolation. At some point, Blake realized that people didn't just love his music, they expected him to always be on. Always funny, always upbeat, always the lovable cowboy. But no one can be that person all the time. Especially someone carrying as much pain as he was. The worst part was the loneliness. Because even when you're surrounded by people, agents, managers, fans, crews, it doesn't mean you're truly seen. Blake Shelton had the attention of millions, but behind the curtain, he was often alone. And in that solitude, he started to wrestle with the hardest questions. Who am I without the music? What do I really want? And is this the life I chose, or the life that chose me? That's what happens when a dream becomes a cage. It doesn't happen all at once. It starts with small compromises, a missed birthday, a skipped vacation, a moment where you bite your tongue because the brand matters more than the truth. And before you know it, you're not living for yourself anymore. You're performing a version of your life that's been polished for public consumption. The spotlight starts to burn, the applause feels empty, and the dream starts to feel like a prison. That's why in 2023, Blake stepped down from The Voice. It wasn't just a career move. It was a cry for balance, a desire to reclaim something he had lost along the way. Peace, purpose, presence. He wanted to wake up without cameras, to spend mornings with coffee instead of call times, to hear birds instead of studio lights humming, and most of all, to finally be Blake. Not the entertainer, not the brand, but the man. He didn't quit music, but he did slow down. Because after decades of running, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop. Not because you failed, but because you finally understand that success without peace isn't really success at all. Blake Shelton still loves music. It's in his blood. But now he's learning to love life too. The quiet kind, the ordinary kind, the kind that doesn't come with a stage, but with stillness, the kind that allows room for healing. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the dream was never supposed to be a cage. Maybe it just took Blake a while to find the key.